had spent my entire life dreaming of a love like this. The kind of love that felt like a fairy tale, effortless, magical, and unbreakable. And for the past 4 years, I believed I had found it with Nathan, my fiancé. He was charming, devoted, and everything I had ever wanted. We had built a life together, one that felt stable and promising. Tomorrow was supposed to be our wedding day. My wedding dress hung in my bedroom, draped in delicate white lace, waiting for me. The venue was decorated, guests had flown in from all over the country, and everything was perfectly set in place. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I walked through our apartment, admiring the life we had built. Nathan had left early that morning to run some last-minute errands, and I was finalizing the wedding details. My best friend Olivia was helping me, sorting through the seating chart, laughing as we reminisced about old memories. "You're glowing," she said, nudging me playfully. "You're really about to be Mrs. Carter." I smiled, the kind of smile you give when you truly believe everything is perfect. Nathan and I had met in college. He was the guy every girl wanted, tall, confident, and effortlessly charismatic. But somehow, out of all the women who fawned over him, he had chosen me. We built a love that felt unshakable, and I had no reason to doubt him. His best friend Caleb had always been around too. The three of us had spent so many years together. Nathan, Caleb, and me. Caleb was different from Nathan. He was reserved, quieter, more observant. While Nathan was the center of attention, Caleb was the one always watching from the sidelines, making sure everything stayed in order. Caleb had been our rock. He was the one who listened when Nathan and I fought, the one who mediated our arguments, the one who always reminded us how much we loved each other. I trusted him as much as I trusted Nathan. So when Caleb walked into the apartment that afternoon, I greeted him with a warm smile. "Hey, aren't you supposed to be helping Nathan with the tuxes?" I asked. Caleb didn't respond right away. His jaw was tense, his usually calm expression clouded with something I couldn't place. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice unusually serious. Olivia sensed the shift in energy. "I'll give you a moment," she said, stepping out of the room. I frowned. "What's going on?" Caleb hesitated. I had never seen him look so conflicted. His hands clenched into fists, and I could see the internal battle he was fighting. Finally he exhaled. "There's something you need to know." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Caleb, you're scaring me." He met my gaze, his eyes filled with something between anger and regret. "I wasn't going to say anything," he admitted. "I told myself it wasn't my place. But I can't let you marry him without knowing the truth." My stomach twisted. "What truth?" Caleb ran a hand through his dark brown hair, looking like he wished he could be anywhere else but here. "Nathan has been cheating on you." Everything stopped. My heart beat. My breathing. The world around me. The words hit like a wrecking ball, smashing through the perfect illusion I had been living in. I let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "That's not funny, Caleb. I'm not joking." His voice was low, serious. "I have proof." I shook my head. "No. Oh, you're wrong. Nathan loves me." He couldn't. Caleb pulled out his phone and handed it to me. I stared at the screen. And then my world collapsed. There on the screen were pictures and messages. Nathan, my fiancé, with another woman. Texts that made my stomach turn. Intimate pictures, late-night rendezvous, and worst of all, this had been going on for months. My chest tightened, my breath came in sharp gasps. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I looked up at Caleb, my vision blurred with tears. "Why are you showing me this?" I whispered. "Because you deserve to know," he said softly. "Because you deserve better." A sob broke from my lips as I clutched the phone, my entire body trembling. Everything had been a lie. Every "I love you." Every promise of forever. Every moment I thought was real. Gone. Tomorrow I was supposed to be his wife. And tonight I was finding out that I had never truly been his to begin with. I couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through Nathan's messages, each word slicing deeper into my chest. "I love you, but they weren't sent to me. I can't wait to be with you, but they weren't meant for me." Every single lie unraveled before my eyes. Caleb sat across from me, silent, watching as my world crumbled in real time. His face was filled with regret but not guilt, because he wasn't the one who had betrayed me. He was just the one who had broken the illusion. "Tell me everything," I whispered. My voice was barely audible, but I needed to know. "All of it." Caleb exhaled, his jaw tightening. It started months ago. I didn't think much of it at first. Just a few suspicious things. Nathan sneaking out, disappearing without telling anyone where he was going. But then, he paused, hesitating. But then what? My voice cracked. I saw them, he admitted. At a restaurant across town. They were holding hands. Kissing. A sharp pain shot through my chest. The idea of Nathan, my Nathan, with another woman made my stomach churn. I gripped the phone tighter, my fingernails digging into my palm. Who is she? Caleb hesitated. I could tell he didn't want to tell me, but I needed to know. He ran a hand through his dark brown hair, his blue eyes filled with something that looked dangerously close to rage. It's someone you know, he said carefully. I stopped breathing. Someone I knew? My mind raced through the possibilities, searching for an answer I wasn't ready to hear. Friend? A coworker? Who? My voice was barely above a whisper. Caleb's jaw tensed. He hesitated for a second too long. And then he said her name. Olivia. I felt sick. The room tilted, my vision swam, and for a second I thought I might actually throw up. That's not possible, I muttered. Olivia is my best friend. I know. I just saw her. She was here helping me plan my wedding. My breath came in short gasps. She told me I was glowing. She smiled at me like, my voice broke. Like she hadn't been sneaking around behind my back. Like she hadn't been sleeping with my fiancé. Like she hadn't lied to my face. I sank onto the couch, clutching my chest. It physically hurt, like someone had reached inside me and ripped something vital away. Nathan had betrayed me. But Olivia? She had stood beside me, smiled at me, listened to me talk about my love for him, and all along she had been stabbing me in the back. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing this all to be a horrible nightmare. But when I opened them, the messages were still there. The proof was undeniable. Nathan and Olivia. My fiancé and my best friend. Together. I sucked in a shaky breath. Does anyone else know? Caleb shook his head. No. I haven't told anyone. I wanted to tell you first. Why? My voice was laced with bitterness. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Because you deserve better. Because I couldn't stand watching him lie to you anymore. I swallowed hard, trying to process it all. What are you going to do? Caleb asked carefully. I lifted my gaze to his. I had two choices. I could collapse under the weight of this betrayal, cancel the wedding and let them win. Or I could do something they would never expect. A slow, bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat, surprising even me. You know what's funny? I said, my voice hoarse. Everyone is expecting a wedding tomorrow. Caleb frowned. What are you saying? I met his gaze, my mind spinning with a reckless, wild idea. I'm saying, maybe there will still be one. Caleb's brows knitted together in confusion. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. If Nathan thinks he can cheat on me and get away with it, he has another thing coming. My hands curled into fists. Tomorrow there will be a wedding. But I won't be the one standing beside him at the altar. Caleb's eyes widened slightly as realization dawned on him. You can't be serious, he said. I smirked through my pain. Oh, I've never been more serious in my life. Caleb stared at me for a long moment. And then to my surprise he smiled. You're insane, he muttered. Maybe. I exhaled, wiping my tears. But I refused to be the victim in my own story. Caleb's expression softened. You know, he said carefully, if you really go through with this, I'll stand by you. Whatever you need. I searched his face for any sign of hesitation. But there was none. You'd do that? I asked. His blue eyes held steady. Yeah. I would. I didn't know why those words sent a shiver down my spine. But for the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel alone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind raced with everything I had lost in just a few hours. Nathan wasn't just my fiancé. He was the man I had trusted with my heart, my dreams, my future. And Olivia? She was more than just a friend. She was my maid of honor, my sister and everything but blood, the person I turned to when life got hard. And yet they had both betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. Every memory I had with them was now tainted. Every late-night conversation with Olivia about how much I loved Nathan. Every time he pulled me into his arms and told me I was the only one for him. All lies. By morning I had gone through every possible emotion. Rage, despair, heartbreak, humiliation. But when I looked at myself in the mirror, something shifted. I had cried enough. I had suffered enough. And I wasn't going to let them destroy me. At noon, I drove to our wedding venue. The grand hall was already decorated, the flowers arranged, the candles placed on every table. It was beautiful. And it was all built on a lie. I found Nathan in one of the groom's suites, casually fixing his tie in the mirror like he hadn't just ripped my world apart. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "Hey babe, I was just about to call you." "Did you?" Slap. The sound echoed in the room. My palms stung, but it was nothing compared to the burning betrayal in my chest. Nathan stumbled back, shocked. "What the hell, babe? Don't call me that." My voice shook with rage. "I know everything, Nathan. Every disgusting, vile thing you've been doing behind my back. I know about Olivia." His face paled. For the first time since meeting him, I saw fear in his eyes. How did you?" "That doesn't matter," I snapped. "What matters is that you've been lying to me for months. Sleeping with my best friend while planning a future with me. Did you ever feel guilty? Even for a second?" Nathan's mouth opened and closed, but he had no excuse. And I was done listening to his lies. "You can save your pathetic explanations," I continued. "Because as of right now, we're done." Nathan blinked, finally realizing the weight of the situation. "Wait, let's talk about this." I laughed, but it was cold, empty. "Oh, don't worry. Tomorrow. In front of all our guests." His brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" I smirked. "Let him wonder. Let him sweat. You'll see," I said simply. Then I turned on my heel and walked out. For the first time in hours, I felt in control. As I stepped outside, the weight of what I had just done finally settled on me. The wedding wasn't just my day. It involved hundreds of guests, our families, months of planning. I had two options. I could cancel everything and let Nathan and Olivia win, humiliating me even further. Or I could do something that no one, especially not Nathan, would ever expect. And I had the perfect person to help me. I drove straight to Caleb's apartment. My hands trembled as I knocked on his door, but this time, it wasn't because of heartbreak. It was because of what I was about to ask. The door swung open and there he was, Caleb, the only person who had stood by me through this nightmare. His blue eyes immediately filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I have an idea." He sighed, stepping aside to let me in. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." I took a deep breath, looking him straight in the eyes. "Caleb, will you marry me?" His expression froze. For the first time in his life, Caleb was speechless. What?" I exhaled, forcing myself to stay calm. "Listen to me. The wedding is already planned. Everyone will be there. Nathan is expecting me to be humiliated, to walk away broken. But I refused to let him win." Caleb stared at me like I had just lost my mind. "Let me get this straight," he said slowly. "You want to marry me instead of him?" "Yes." "You want to stand at the altar, look him in the eyes, and marry his best friend?" "Yes." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, letting out a low whistle. "Damn. That's the boldest revenge plan I've ever heard." I smirked. "So will you do it?" He studied me carefully, and for a moment I thought he was going to refuse. But then his lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You know what?" he said. "Screw it. Let's do it." And just like that, my wedding day was back on. But this time, it was on my terms. As soon as the words left Caleb's mouth, "Let's do it," something inside me shifted. For hours I had been drowning in heartbreak, betrayal, and humiliation. But now I felt powerful. Nathan thought he had played me. He thought I would cry, run, disappear. But instead I was going to stand in front of everyone we knew, and prove that he was the one who lost. Caleb? He was the unexpected ally I never knew I needed. After our impulsive decision, reality hit us both. We had just agreed to get married in less than 24 hours. "All right," Caleb said, rubbing the back of his neck. I said yes, but I have one question. Are we actually doing this legally, or is this just a show? I hesitated. Legally? That was a whole different level of commitment. I don't know, I admitted. I just want Nathan to see that I'm not weak. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. Then we won't file the paperwork yet. We'll go through the ceremony, make it look real. If you still want to go through with the legal part after, we'll figure it out. A rush of gratitude flooded me. Caleb understood. He wasn't pressuring me, wasn't making this about anything other than what I needed. Thank you, I whispered. He smirked. You're lucky I like chaos. By the time I made it back to my apartment, Olivia had texted me 3 times. Babe, what's going on? Why aren't you answering? Is Nathan acting weird? He won't talk to me either. Call me. I stared at my phone in disgust. The audacity of this woman, acting like my best friend when she was the reason I was heartbroken in the first place. I blocked her number. Then I called my maid of honor, Sophie. If there was anyone I trusted now, it was her. Are you okay? Sophie asked the second she picked up. I heard you and Nathan had a fight. We're done, I cut in. And I need your help. Silence. Then, what do you need? I took a deep breath. A wedding dress. A new one. Sophie gasped. Wait, what? I'm still getting married. To who? Caleb. Dead silence. Then she whispered, oh my God. This is the greatest revenge plan I've ever heard. The morning of the wedding I felt calm. Not broken. Not anxious. Just ready. Sophie and a few other close friends had helped me find a new dress. It was simpler than my original gown, but it was perfect. Elegant. Powerful. A dress that commanded attention. As I stood in front of the mirror adjusting the veil, there was a knock at the door. Sophie opened it, then immediately blocked the doorway. What do you want, Nathan? She snapped. My heart stopped. Nathan. He was here. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. And for the first time I saw panic in his eyes. You look beautiful, he said, stepping forward. His voice was softer, gentler than I had ever heard it. Can we talk? Sophie crossed her arms. She doesn't need to talk to you. I inhaled deeply. It's fine, sophomore. She shot me a warning look before reluctantly stepping aside. Nathan took a few steps closer, lowering his voice. What are you doing? I smirked. Getting married. His jaw tensed. To Caleb. That's right. A flash of something dark crossed his face. This is a joke, right? I tilted my head, pretending to think. Nope. His hands curled into fists. You're making a mistake. I laughed, actually laughed. Nathan, do you really think I care about your opinion anymore? He exhaled harshly, running a hand through his hair. I screwed up. I know that. But you don't have to. I cut him off. You thought I would break, I said, my voice steady. You thought I would disappear, cry, beg you to come back. But instead I found someone better. Nathan clenched his jaw. He's my best friend. Yeah, I said, smiling sweetly. And he's a much better man than you ever were. Nathan's face darkened. Don't do this, he muttered. You don't love him. My smile didn't waver. And yet here I am. About to say I do. I stepped forward, looking him directly in the eyes. You lost Nathan. And you have no one to blame but yourself. He stared at me, his face unreadable. Then without another word he turned and stormed out. Sophie clapped. Damn, that was satisfying. I exhaled, shaking off the lingering tension. It's time. Let's go get you married. The venue was packed. Hundreds of guests sat in their seats, all expecting one thing. They expected me to walk down the aisle toward Nathan. They expected the perfect wedding. They had no idea what was coming. The music started. I took a deep breath, then stepped forward. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd as they realized. Nathan wasn't at the altar. Instead, Caleb stood there. Strong. Completely calm. Nathan, who was seated in the front row, looked furious. And Olivia? She was nowhere to be seen. Gasps filled the room as I kept walking. I reached Caleb, taking his hands in mine. He grinned down at me, whispering, Are you ready? I smiled. More than ever. The officiant cleared his throat, struggling to keep a straight face. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today for a union unlike any other. The crowd was whispering, murmuring in shock. Me. I just smiled. The whispers in the crowd were growing louder. People turned to each other, confused, some even pulling out their phones to take pictures or record the most unexpected wedding twist of the century. I could feel the chaos unfolding behind me. I could feel Nathan's rage, his disbelief, his humiliation. But most importantly, I could feel Caleb's steady presence beside me. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't hesitating. He was here, standing with me, ready to go through with this insane, beautiful disaster of a plan. And that made all the difference. Just as the officiant was about to begin, Nathan shot up from his seat. This is a joke, right? His voice rang through the venue, loud and furious. People gasped. My mother covered her mouth in shock, and a few of Nathan's friends exchanged worried glances. I didn't turn around. Dad, I just smiled. No, Nathan, I said sweetly, my voice carrying across the room. The joke was thinking I'd still marry you after what you did. He took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. Are you serious right now? His voice was filled with pure disbelief. You're actually marrying him? My best friend. I shrugged. Well, you clearly didn't want to be my husband. Someone else was more than happy to step up. Nathan looked like he was going to explode. This isn't happening, he muttered, shaking his head. This is insane. Caleb finally spoke. Sit down, Nathan, he said calmly. You lost. Don't make it worse for yourself. I turned to glance at Nathan, and that's when I saw it. Pure, unfiltered hatred in his eyes. Not just for me. For Caleb. This wasn't just about me anymore. Nathan felt betrayed too. But the difference? Nathan betrayed me first. He made his choice. And so did I. Without another word, Nathan let out a bitter laugh and stormed out of the wedding. Gasps. Murmurs. Pure shock. But I didn't care. I turned back to Caleb, my real groom. Shall we continue? I asked. His lips curved into a smirk. Absolutely. The officiant, still a little flustered from everything that just happened, cleared his throat and tried to regain control. Right, he said. Well, we're here to celebrate a union between two people who, clearly enjoy surprising everyone. A ripple of laughter passed through the guests. I turned to Caleb, feeling something strange bubbling in my chest. Not just bitterness, not just revenge, but something real. And it hit me. Caleb had been by my side for years. He had never once let me down. He had never lied to me. He had always been there. And now, standing across from him, holding his hands in front of hundreds of people, I realized. Maybe this wasn't just about getting back at Nathan. Maybe this was about choosing the person who had always been good to me. Caleb must have seen something in my expression because he gave me a small squeeze. Still good, he whispered. I nodded. More than good. I'm ready, I said. So we said our vows. Not traditional ones. Not ones filled with flowery, pre-planned words. Ours were simple. Caleb looked me in the eyes and said, I promise to always have your back. I smiled. And I promise to always have yours. It wasn't about fairy tale love. It wasn't about happily ever after. It was about trust. And that was more real than anything I had ever had with Nathan. The officiant smiled. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss, your best friend's ex-fiancé. The crowd laughed, breaking the tension. Caleb turned to me, eyes locked onto mine. You sure about this? He whispered one last time. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed his collar and kissed him. And just like that, I was married. By the time we made it to the reception, the entire world knew. Social media was exploding. People who had attended the wedding had posted videos, pictures, captions filled with disbelief. Bride dumps cheating fiancé and marries his best friend instead. Most iconic wedding I've ever attended. This is better than any reality show I've ever seen. I scrolled through my phone watching the chaos unfold. Olivia had gone completely silent. Nathan had disappeared. Caleb? He was sitting beside me, sipping champagne, looking completely unbothered. I touched him. We broke the internet. He smirked. You're welcome. I shook my head, laughing. You realize this is the craziest thing we've ever done, right? He shrugged. It was worth it. I looked around, watching as people danced, laughed, celebrated a wedding that wasn't supposed to happen. And for the first time I felt happy. Not just because I got my revenge. Not just because Nathan got what he deserved. But because, in some unexpected, insane way, maybe this was exactly where I was meant to be. The wedding was over, the vows had been said, and my lips had actually touched Caleb's in front of everyone. And now, as I stood in my wedding dress, married to a man I hadn't planned to marry just 24 hours ago, I realized something. This wasn't just a statement. This wasn't just revenge. This was real. The weight of it all was finally starting to sink in. I was someone's wife. And that someone was Caleb, the best friend of my ex-fiancé, the man who had always been in the background, the man who, despite everything, had chosen to stand by me. And now I had his last name. What the hell? The wedding reception had turned into a mix of stunned silence, wild gossip, and straight-up celebration. Some guests still looked completely shocked, unable to process what had just happened. Others were thrilled, drinking, dancing, and whispering about how this was the best wedding twist in history. Sophie was absolutely loving it. She clinked her champagne glass against mine, smirking. I have to say, babe, I thought this would end in tears. Instead, you ended up with the most legendary wedding in existence. I exhaled, finally taking a sip of champagne. Honestly, I still can't believe we did this. Sophie laughed. Oh honey, we all can't believe you did this. Then she glanced across the room where Caleb was calmly talking to my mother. Like he hadn't just married me in the most dramatic way possible. My mother still looked in complete shock. She wasn't angry exactly, just struggling to process what had happened. You should probably go talk to her before she has a heart attack, Sophie whispered. I sighed. Yeah. Wish me luck. My mom was sitting at one of the round tables, her hands folded in her lap, watching the scene unfold around her. I sat down next to her. Mom. She held up a hand. Give me a second. I need to process this. I stayed silent. She took a deep breath, then finally turned to me. So, are you happy? I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Was I happy? I wasn't sure. I was still processing everything myself. But I knew one thing for certain. I was happier than I would have been if I had married Nathan. So I nodded. Yeah. I think I am. Mom studied me carefully, then sighed. Well, I suppose it's not the worst thing that could have happened. At least Caleb is a good man. I blinked. Wait, you're not mad? She laughed dryly. Mad? Sweetheart, after what Nathan did, I would have supported you marrying a random stranger off the street just to get back at him. I choked on my champagne. Mom. She smirked. I have to admit though, Caleb was the best possible choice. That caught me off guard. The best choice? I asked. What do you mean? She leaned in slightly. I always thought he cared about you more than he let on. My stomach flipped. I didn't have time to unpack that thought because at that moment, a voice interrupted us. Mind if I steal my wife for a dance? I turned to look at him, and for the first time it really hit me. He was my husband. My husband. What the hell? Mom smirked. Go on, dear. Might as well dance with the man you just married. I hadn't thought about the first dance. I mean, how could I? I was too busy replacing my groom at the last minute. But now, as Caleb and I stepped onto the dance floor, I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes watching us. The music started, soft, slow, intimate. I suddenly felt awkward. Because this wasn't Nathan. This wasn't the man I had planned to be with. This was Caleb. And I had no idea what we were supposed to be now. Caleb must have sensed my hesitation because he leaned in slightly, his voice low and reassuring. Relax, he murmured. We already shocked them enough for one day. I let out a shaky breath. Right. No pressure. He smiled. A real, genuine smile. And for the first time I let myself really look at him. Caleb had always been there. Always in the background. Always steady. Always reliable. And now he was holding me like I actually mattered. The world blurred around us as we swayed to the music. For the first time all night I wasn't thinking about Nathan. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was just thinking about Caleb. And that scared me more than anything else. By the time the reception ended, my head was spinning. Not just from the champagne but from everything. The wedding was over. Nathan was gone. Olivia had vanished. Now I was married. As Caleb and I got into the car, heading to the hotel suite that had originally been booked for my honeymoon with Nathan, reality hit hard. What happens now? I asked. Caleb glanced at me, his expression unreadable. That's up to you, he said simply. I swallowed hard. Do you regret this? He smirked slightly. Not even a little. I let out a breath, staring out the window. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was for sure. This was only the beginning. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was silence. No frantic wedding planning. No calls from Olivia. No texts from Nathan. Just silence. And I felt it. The weight of someone else in the bed beside me. Right. I was married. Caleb. Nathan's best friend. Reality crashed down on me all over again. I turned my head slowly, almost afraid of what I'd see. Caleb was still asleep, his bare chest rising and falling with steady breaths. His dark brown hair was a little messy, and there was a peace in his face that I had never seen before. I had slept beside Nathan for years, but somehow this felt different, and I had no idea why. I carefully slid out of bed, wrapping a robe around myself before heading to the hotel room's massive window. The city skyline stretched before me, bathed in soft golden light. What happens now? I had married a man for revenge. A man I had never once imagined as my husband. And yet, when I thought about last night, the wedding, the vows, the dance, I didn't regret it. That was the scariest part. I didn't regret it. Morning. I jumped slightly, turning to find Caleb awake, his voice thick with sleep. I swallowed. Hey. For a moment we just stared at each other. I suddenly felt nervous. Because now we had to talk about what this actually meant. How are you feeling? Caleb asked, stretching slightly. I hesitated. Honestly, I have no idea. He smirked. That makes two of us. We fell into a moment of silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. Just heavy. As now the game was over. The revenge had been served. And I had to ask the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind all night. What do we do now, Caleb? He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Well, I think the first step is figuring out if we're actually going to stay married. Right. That. I had been so focused on ruining Nathan's life that I hadn't even considered whether this was supposed to be temporary or permanent. Do you want to? I asked hesitantly. Caleb studied me, his blue eyes unreadable. I don't regret marrying you. But I also don't want to force you into something you don't want. I swallowed. I don't know what I want yet. And that was the truth. Because for the first time in years I wasn't just somebody's fiancé. I was my own person again. And I had to figure out what that meant. The first message from Nathan came at exactly 10:04 a.m. Are you actually serious? You think this is funny? Then another. You ruined your own wedding just to humiliate me? And another. Caleb is a traitor. He's dead to me. But you're worse. You're a pathetic, desperate joke. I stared at my phone, completely numb. Nathan was angry. Good. I blocked his number. Then I turned off my phone. I wasn't going to waste a single second of my life entertaining his tantrums. But I knew this wasn't over. Nathan wasn't the type of man who accepted defeat. He was going to come for me. The only question was how. By noon the wedding had gone viral. Social media was exploding. There were photos, videos, people debating whether I was a genius or a lunatic. Did you guys see the wedding where the bride married the groom's best friend? Icon behavior. She really said keep the wedding, change the husband. This is next level pettiness. I have no choice but to respect it. I need a Netflix documentary about this immediately. And then there were the other comments. She's insane. Who does that? This wasn't revenge. This was desperation. Poor Caleb. She's obviously using him. That one stung. Because for the first time I wondered, was I using Caleb? I had been so caught up in hurting Nathan that I hadn't stopped to think about what Caleb actually wanted. And yet he had said yes. He had stood at that altar. He had kissed me in front of everyone. But that night as we sat in our hotel suite I finally asked him, why did you do it? Caleb looked up from his drink, his blue eyes calm. Do what? You could have walked away, I said. You could have let me deal with this on my own. But you didn't. Why? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. Because I couldn't stand the thought of you being heartbroken alone. My breath hitched. His voice was steady, certain. I've watched you love him for years, he continued. I watched you believe he was the best thing that ever happened to you. And I knew he didn't deserve you. I swallowed hard. Caleb. He ran a hand through his hair. I should have told you about Olivia sooner. But I didn't. And I regret that. But the moment you found out, I knew I wasn't going to let you go through it alone. Something in my chest cracked open. Because in all the years I had been with Nathan, I had never felt this safe. Caleb had no reason to step in. But he chose to. No. I didn't know what to do with that. I had gone into this wedding with one goal, revenge. But now I was married to a man who had been quietly protecting me all along. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if this was just a temporary arrangement, or something more. Caleb had risked everything for me. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to let him go. The days after the wedding were strange. Not because I regretted it. Not because Caleb and I didn't get along. But because for the first time in my life I had no idea where I stood. I had spent years as Nathan's fiancé. My entire identity had been tied to being his future wife. Now I was married to his best friend. And I had no idea what that meant. I woke up in our hotel suite, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't mine. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air. I turned, expecting to see Caleb still asleep. Instead, I found him standing by the window, shirtless, sipping coffee like he hadn't just turned my entire world upside down. His broad shoulders were tense, his messy hair catching the morning light. For a moment I just watched him. Because now this was my husband. Nathan had always been polished, too polished. Everything about him had been calculated, perfect. Caleb was real. He rubbed his jaw, exhaling deeply before finally turning to look at me. "You're awake." I cleared my throat, sitting up. "Yeah." A beat of silence. Then he smirked. "Regretting it yet?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I don't think so." His smirk softened into something gentler. "Good." And then he did something I wasn't expecting. He walked over to the bed, sat beside me and handed me a coffee cup. Like this was normal. Like we had been doing this for years. I took the cup, staring at him. "You're handling this really well." He shrugged. "It's not the weirdest thing I've done." I raised an eyebrow. "You married your best friend's ex-fiancé. If there's something weirder than that, I'd love to hear it." He chuckled, leaning back on one elbow. "Fair point." And just like that, I relaxed. Caleb wasn't making this awkward. He wasn't making me feel stupid or reckless. He was just here. And that was more than Nathan had ever been. By noon, the world had fully processed what had happened. It was all over social media. The bride who married the best man. Justice served. The best revenge wedding ever. What if they actually fall in love? That last one stuck with me. I shook the thought away. This wasn't about love. This was about winning. At least that's what I kept telling myself. 2 days after the wedding, Caleb and I were back home. We had agreed to figure things out as we went. No pressure. No expectations. Just existing. But that was easier said than done. Because the moment we stepped into our shared apartment, reality crashed down on us. I stared at my surroundings, the apartment I had decorated with Nathan. The pictures still on the walls. The wedding gifts with Nathan and me written on the tags. Everything screamed of the life I was supposed to have. "Caleb?" He noticed. "You okay?" he asked, watching me carefully. I inhaled sharply. "Yeah. This place isn't mine anymore." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then let's fix that." And just like that, he grabbed one of the picture frames from the shelf, a photo of me and Nathan, and tossed it into the trash. I blinked. Then before I could stop myself, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Caleb smirked. "There she is." I exhaled. "Hey, let's fix this." And so, we wiped Nathan out of my life. We took down the pictures. We packed up his things. We threw away the wedding gifts meant for a marriage that never happened. By the time we were done, I felt lighter. But there was still one problem. We had no idea how to live together. The first week was interesting. Caleb was too comfortable. Walking around shirtless. Stealing my coffee. Taking up all the space on the couch. I was used to politeness. Nathan had been controlled, neat, proper. Caleb was the opposite. And I didn't know how to handle it. One night, I found him sprawled on the couch, feet on the coffee table, flipping through TV channels. I crossed my arms. "So, are we setting house rules, or are you just planning to take over everything?" He glanced up, smirking. "We're married, remember? What's mine is yours." I rolled my eyes. "That's not how this works." He stretched. "You could just admit you like having me around." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was, I did. And that was starting to terrify me. Just as I was starting to settle into this new life, a storm came crashing in. Nathan wasn't done. Not even close. The first time I saw him again was completely unexpected. I was at a cafe ordering coffee when suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. A chill ran down my spine. And then, "We need to talk." I turned around. Nathan stood there, jaw clenched, eyes dark. I inhaled sharply. "I have nothing to say to you." He scoffed. "That's funny because I have a lot to say to you." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. "Let go," I said, my voice low. "Not until you explain yourself," he hissed. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You married my best friend out of spite. And now what? You're just playing house. Anger rose in my chest. I yanked my hand away. No, Nathan. I'm moving on. Something you should try for yourself. His jaw tightened. I don't believe you. I laughed. Actually laughed. Of course you don't. Because that would mean accepting that you lost. And we both know your ego can't handle that. I turned and walked away, not giving him the chance to respond. And just as I stepped outside, I saw him. Leaning against his car, arms crossed, watching everything. He met my gaze. You good? I swallowed hard, nodding. Caleb nodded once, then opened the passenger door for me. I climbed in without a word. And as we drove away, I realized something. Nathan might never stop trying to control me. But I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger. And this time, I had Caleb. Nathan wasn't done with me. I knew it from the moment I saw him standing outside that cafe. The way his jaw clenched, the way his eyes burned with something dangerous. Nathan wasn't just angry. He was humiliated. And a man like him, he wasn't going to let that go. The first attack came in the form of guilt. A message. I loved you. I made a mistake, but you threw everything away over one mistake. Was it really worth it? I stared at my phone, my stomach twisting. Because this was his tactic. He was twisting the story, rewriting history. One mistake. One mistake. He had cheated on me for months with someone I had called my best friend. And now he was trying to make it seem like I was the one who ruined everything. I clenched my jaw. Then I deleted the message. No response. He didn't deserve one. The second attack came in the form of rumors. It started small. People whispering behind my back. Friends acting weird. Then one afternoon Sophie called me. Hey, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice hesitant. I sat up straighter. What's wrong? She sighed. Nathan's been telling people that Caleb and you were hooking up before the wedding. That this was planned all along. I froze. What? I know, Sophie said quickly. It's complete crap. But people are talking. He's saying you used him. That you were never really in love with him. That you and Caleb played him like a fool. My stomach dropped. Because I knew exactly what Nathan was doing. He had lost control over the situation. So now, he was trying to rewrite the narrative. Trying to make me the villain. That night, as I sat on the couch, staring at the messages piling up on my phone, Caleb walked in. He took one look at me and sighed. Nathan. I nodded. He's telling people we were together before the wedding. That I used him. Caleb scoffed, shaking his head. Of course he is. I looked up at him. Does this bother you? He shrugged. I knew he'd pull something like this. It's just desperate. I swallowed hard. People are going to believe him. Caleb sat down beside me, resting an arm on the back of the couch. Does that bother you? I exhaled, not sure how to answer. Did it? I didn't care about Nathan's opinion. But I cared about the way people saw Caleb. Because this wasn't just my reputation on the line anymore. It was his too. Caleb watched me carefully, his blue eyes steady. We know the truth. That's all that matters. I bit my lip. But what if? He leaned in slightly. Do you regret marrying me? The question stunned me. I blinked. What? Do you regret it? He repeated. Because if you do, we can figure out a way to fix it. I opened my mouth. Then closed it. As the truth was, I didn't regret it. Not the wedding. Not Caleb. Not any of it. And that realization terrified me. Days passed and the rumors kept spreading. Then out of nowhere, Nathan called me. Meet me. I frowned, hesitating. Why? I replied. You owe me that much. I owe you nothing. Just talk to me. One last time. Then I'll leave you alone. I knew I shouldn't. I knew nothing good would come from it. But a small, twisted part of me wanted to see what he had to say. So I went. Nathan was waiting for me at a rooftop bar. He was calm, too calm. Dressed in his usual suit, drink in hand, as if he hadn't just spent the past week trying to destroy my life. You actually came, he said, smirking. I wasn't sure you would. I sat down, arms crossed. Say what you need to say. He tilted his head, studying me. I just wanted to see if you were happy. I scoffed. You lost your chance to care about that. His jaw tightened. Did I? You cheated on me, Nathan. You humiliated me, he shot back, his voice low. I exhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm. I didn't humiliate you. You did that to yourself. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. So what now? You and Caleb play house? You think he actually loves you? I stilled. Nathan saw my hesitation and leaned forward. He's using you, he whispered. Just like you're using him. And when all of this wears off, you'll realize you were just a rebound. I clenched my fist. Because his words got to me. That was exactly the fear I hadn't been able to admit to myself. Was this real? Or was I just holding on to Caleb because I didn't want to be alone? Nathan smirked. See? Even you're doubting it. I stood up. You don't get to control me anymore, Nathan. And you don't get to tell me how I feel. His smirk faded. For the first time I saw it. The realization that he had truly lost me. I turned to leave. But just before I walked away he said something that stopped me cold. You'll regret this, sweetheart. A chill ran down my spine. I walked away anyway. Because no matter how much doubt he tried to plant in my head, I wasn't his to manipulate anymore. I told myself I wouldn't let Nathan's words get to me. But they did. Because now every time Caleb walked into the room, every time he flashed that easy smirk, every time he did something small, like making sure I had coffee in the morning or tossing me a blanket when I looked cold, I wondered, was this just temporary? Or was something real happening between us? It was late, almost midnight. I had been tossing and turning in bed, my mind racing. Nathan's words wouldn't leave me alone. You think he actually loves you? You're just using each other. I sighed, sitting up and pushing the blankets off. Then I heard it. The soft sound of the TV from the living room. Curious, I got up and padded toward the noise. And there was Caleb. Sitting on the couch in sweatpants and a hoodie, a half-eaten bag of chips in his lap, his feet resting on the coffee table. He turned his head when he saw me. Couldn't sleep. I shook my head. You? He shrugged. Didn't really try. I hesitated for a second before finally sitting down next to him. We sat in silence, the glow of the TV flickering in front of us. And then, without thinking, I asked the question that had been eating at me for days. Why did you say yes? Caleb didn't look at me right away. Instead, he grabbed a chip, tossed it in his mouth and chewed for a second. Then, because I wanted to, I swallowed. That's not an answer. He smirked. Sure it is. I turned to fully face him. Caleb. His smirk faded slightly. He set the bag of chips aside and finally met my eyes. I said yes because I care about you, he said simply. I always have. My breath caught. He didn't look away. Didn't act like this was just some throwaway conversation. For the first time since this entire situation started, I felt completely exposed. I thought we were just pretending, I whispered. Caleb exhaled. We were. Pause. Then, but I'm not pretending anymore. My heart stopped. He leaned in slightly, watching my reaction carefully. You don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. But I meant what I said before. I don't regret marrying you. And I don't want to undo it. I couldn't breathe. Because I didn't want to undo it either. But admitting that out loud? That was terrifying. So instead of speaking, I did something I never expected myself to do. I kissed him. And this time it wasn't for show. It wasn't for revenge. It wasn't for anyone else but me. And as Caleb's hands slid into my hair, pulling me closer, I realized something that shook me to my core. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This was real. And I was falling for my husband. I woke up still wrapped in his arms. It should have felt strange. But it didn't. Caleb was already awake, watching me with an unreadable expression. I swallowed, my voice hoarse. Are we gonna talk about that? A slow smirk spread across his face. Depends. Are you gonna run? I sighed, rolling my eyes. Caleb. He chuckled, shaking his head. Relax. We don't have to figure everything out today. But we can be honest, yeah. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Because the truth was, I didn't want to run. I just needed to figure out where we went from here. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't scared of finding out that I woke up still wrapped in his arms. It should have felt strange. But it didn't. Caleb was already awake, watching me with an unreadable expression. I swallowed, my voice hoarse. Are we gonna talk about that? A slow smirk spread across his face. Depends. Are you gonna run? I sighed, rolling my eyes. Caleb. He chuckled, shaking his head. Relax. We don't have to figure everything out today. But we can be honest, yeah. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. Because the truth was, I didn't want to run. I just needed to figure out where we went from here. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I wasn't scared of finding out. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had finally found solid ground. No more pretending. No more revenge. No more proving a point. Because this, whatever it was between Caleb and me, was real. And that terrified me more than anything. I should have known Nathan wouldn't stay quiet. Just when I thought I had left him behind, he found one last way to pull me back. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. Caleb had gone out to pick up coffee, and I was still curled up in bed when I heard a knock at the door. I frowned, rolling out of bed and padding across the apartment. When I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Nathan, standing there like he had any right to be here. Dressed in a dark jacket, his hands in his pockets, his brown eyes intense. I exhaled sharply. What do you want, Nathan? He leaned against the doorframe, studying me. You look good. I scowled. And you look desperate. A flash of irritation crossed his face. I just want to talk. There's nothing left to say, I snapped. Nathan exhaled, his mask slipping. I don't believe you, he said. I narrowed my eyes. What? He smirked. That same arrogant smirk I used to fall for. You're not in love with Caleb. My stomach tightened. I get it, he continued. You needed to hurt me. You needed to prove a point. But let's stop pretending, okay? We both know you don't love him. Something inside me snapped. Because for weeks I had been fighting myself, wondering if what I felt for Caleb was real or just an escape. And here was Nathan thinking he knew me better than I knew myself. Like I was still his to control. I took a slow, deep breath. You're right. Nathan's smirk grew. I knew it. But you know what else? I cut in. I don't love you either. His smirk froze. I stepped closer, meeting his gaze head-on. I don't love you, Nathan, I said, my voice calm, certain. Not anymore. And it has nothing to do with Caleb. It has everything to do with you. You destroyed what we had. You lied, you cheated, and now you're standing here like you have the right to question who I love. Nathan's jaw tightened. You're a coward, I continued. You only want me now because you can't have me. But guess what? I took another step forward, my heart pounding. You will never have me again. For the first time since I had known Nathan. He had nothing to say. He just stared at me, his face blank, emotionless. And I knew this was it. The final moment. The last time he would ever have power over me. I stepped back and shut the door in his face. And just like that, Nathan Carter was nothing but a memory. 15 minutes later, Caleb walked in with coffee. He took one look at me and knew something had happened. Okay, he said, setting the coffee down. What's wrong? I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Nathan came by. Caleb's entire body stiffened. I quickly held up a hand. Relax. I told him to leave. His blue eyes searched mine. And are you okay? I nodded. Yeah. I am. For the first time I really, truly was. Caleb studied me for a long moment. Then he smirked. So, we're officially done with the ex-fiancé drama? I laughed. Actually laughed. Yeah, I admitted. We are. He took a slow sip of his coffee. Good. That means I don't have to fight him. I raised an eyebrow. Fight him? Caleb, you're the most relaxed person I know. He grinned. Doesn't mean I don't have limits. Something warm stirred in my chest. Because Caleb had always been there. And now he wasn't going anywhere. That night, as I curled up on the couch, Caleb sat beside me, flipping through channels. The weight of everything hit me. I had spent so much of my life planning a future with the wrong person. No. I had no idea what was next. I looked over at Caleb. At the man who had stepped in when I needed him the most. The man who had stood by my side. Not for revenge, not for show, but because he wanted to. For the first time I saw my future clearly. And I knew exactly who I wanted to share it with. For the first time in years I felt light. No more Nathan. No more doubts. No more past weighing me down. I was free. And in that freedom I found something I never expected. Real love. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was standing in the kitchen sipping coffee, lost in thought, when Caleb walked in. Sleepy, hair a mess, wearing one of my oversized hoodies. And for some reason the sight of him hit me differently. This was my husband. And I was falling for him. Not in a rushed, dramatic way. Not in the kind of love that felt like a fairy tale. But in the kind of love that felt real. The kind that snuck up on you when you weren't paying attention. Caleb grabbed his own coffee, leaning against the counter. You're staring. I blinked. No, I'm not. He smirked. You definitely are. I rolled my eyes. You're impossible. He grinned, sipping his coffee. You love it. And before I could stop myself, I said it. Yeah, I whispered. I do. The words slipped out before I could take them back. Silence. My heart pounded. Caleb froze, his cup halfway to his lips. Slowly, he lowered it, his blue eyes locked onto mine. What did you just say? I swallowed hard, my palms sweaty. I think I love you. Caleb was still. For the first time, I couldn't read him. Then he smiled. A slow, genuine, breathtaking smile. Good, he murmured, stepping closer. Because I love you too. And then he kissed me. Not like our wedding kiss. Not like the first kiss after the wedding. This was different. This was real. And in that moment I knew. I had finally found where I belonged. 1 year later, I stood in the same apartment, staring at the same man. Only this time I wasn't questioning what we were. I wasn't wondering if this was real. I knew. Because Caleb was everything I had never known I needed. Because love wasn't about the big, grand gestures. It was about the small moments. The way he made me coffee every morning. The way he made me laugh when I was having a bad day. The way he held me like I was the most important thing in his world. I had thought I was marrying Caleb for revenge. But I had actually married him for love. And I didn't even know it. Now, standing in our home wearing his hoodie, watching him cook breakfast, I realized something. Nathan was my past. Caleb was my future. And for the first time, I couldn't wait to see what happened next.